Isso aqui não é de graça. Meus senhores e minhas senhoras, se vossa mercês quiser me pagar, eu conto a história do Francisco Manuel, o bandido cobra verde.
My name is Norman Hill, and I'm here with the director of Cobra Verde, Werner Herzog.
This is a singer, a street singer, actually a tradition in northeastern Brazil of some late remaining rests of troubadour singing. A blind man who sings a ballad of Francisco Manuel da Silva, the bandit Cobra Verde. And I really like the man so much I had him in the film. The beginning was not shot in Brazil, but in Colombia.
This film was based on a novel by Bruce Chatwin called The Viceroy of Ouida.
Ouida, yeah.
What attracted you to this novel?
Well, I read books by Bruce Chatwin in Patagonia first, and then The Viceroy of Ouida, and I was immediately intrigued by the caliber of his writing, and I had the feeling there was something very big out there, and it would be wonderful to make it into a film. And I got in touch with him when I was in Australia preparing Where the Green Ants Dream. And I read in the paper that he happened to be in Australia as well, releasing a new novel. And I called the publisher and they told me, we might find out. And 2 days later they called me back. He's somewhere in the desert in Central Australia. And if I called within 20 minutes a number at a mission station, I would reach him. And I reached him and I asked him, what are you doing? And he said, I'm flying back to England via Sydney. I said, no, you're not flying back. Come to Melbourne. I'm in Melbourne. When I pick you up at the airport, how do I recognize you? And he said, well, I'm boyish and I have a leather rucksack. He always traveled with his leather rucksack, an old-fashioned of the 1930s, which was made by an old saddler, and he slept on it, and he had his books and his stuff in there. And when Bruce actually died, he handed this rucksack over to me, and he said to me, you carry this on now. Because like him, I was someone on foot as well. I traveled on foot a lot, sometimes a couple of thousands of kilometers, and we had the same feeling for space, which you can see here. And of course, inevitably Klaus Kinski as the bandit and slave trader Cobra Verde.
You don't directly translate the book. The book's very detailed.
Sure, and the book is narrated in some sort of cycles, like concentric cycles, and a film story has to go more straight. Here the feeling of space that I tried to create, which was done in a desert in northern Colombia, a 360-degree pan. And that was very bitter to do it because Kinski was completely bonkers, completely out of any control. Actually, that was towards the end of shooting. We shot the whole African part, the bigger part first, because I knew it was the more difficult part. And Kinski was just coming totally apart, totally crazed. And here on that day, that was the only time he ever physically attacked me. He took a huge rock into his fist and attacked me. So that was unusual because normally it would be threats or we would point a gun at each other or plot to murder each other. So, of course, we had our confrontations to a degree that you would normally not find in a relationship between a director and an actor. But that's all fine. I mean, who cares? It's always the result that counts. What you see on the screen, that's what counts. And here a climate of death and desert and dryness and starvation and thirst and solitude. That's where the bandit Cobra Verde comes from.
And here we're in some kind of mines?
Yes, it is a famous place, so-called Serra Pelada in northern Brazil. They found gold there, and shortly before we filmed there were about 20,000-30,000 poor people coming there and digging there under unspeakable conditions. They all actually looked like these men here. As gold had dwindled away, there were only maybe 1,000 or so left. And all the extras here, they're real miners, real poor people who knew how to wash gold. A very dangerous place, actually, because there was lots of lawlessness and murder and attacks.
Wo ist mein Geld? Wo ist mein Geld? Wo sind meine Partner? Wo ist mein Geld?
Kinski, totally crazed, but wonderful in his intensity. There was no one like him.
And you had planned him from the beginning to be the bandit.
Yes.
Was willst du hier schon wieder? Für dich gibt's kein Geld.
Was? Das gibt's doch nicht.
Du kriegst diese Woche überhaupt nichts. Das hat alles die Bank einbehalten. Hau ab.
See how suddenly he goes into things. He was like that in private life as well, unpredictable and
Ich will, dass du wach bist, wenn du stirbst.
and here vindictive and mad. This was shot in Villa de Leyva, a small town in the mountains of Colombia, north of Bogota. A place I liked a lot.
And here the townspeople are running in fear from him.
Yes, he looks a little bit like in a spaghetti western. And of course barefoot. You have to note in the beginning of the film he's always barefoot. Of course in these scenes there's a certain stylization which is vaguely reminiscent of spaghetti westerns. It's something laconic. And I was forced somehow to do so because Kinski was out of control and he was coming apart. And to hold him together and make things still possible was very, very difficult at that time. So the beginning of the film doesn't have the spontaneous wild life in it that the other part, the African part, actually has in it. But I think it's all right that the film starts like this on a level of stylization, on a level of experiences that we have had in the movies before in our life.
Creates a building.
Sometimes a little bit spontaneous life that happens on a location. Of course, you shouldn't miss that. And Kinski, actually, when you look at his face in his mood of the last film that he did, and that was his own film where he wrote and directed and starred, it was Paganini. And in my opinion, unfortunately, a massive failure. Kinski always believed that he was a great director himself, but of course he was not. He always pretended to be. He brought a climate of his film that he had planned for so many years of Paganini into it.
Dein Gewehr bleibt draußen.
And here this is a young kid, a very intelligent young man who was crippled, had a slight speech defect. And I liked him so much and he wanted to be in the film and I said, yes, sure. And I think it's remarkable that the only one who is not afraid of the bandit Cobra Verde is him.
Cobra Verde ist hier.
Ich habe keinen Vater. Das ist meine Bar. Und ich fürchte dich nicht.
Ich heiße Francisco Manuel.
Mein Name ist Euclides. Euclides Alves da Silva Pernambucano Vanderlei.
Ich bin auch ein da Silva.
Nur meine Brust ist eingedrückt. Nachts träumt mich immer, ich habe ein ganzes Gebirge zu tragen.
There's a strange quality about him. He seems sort of enlightened.
Yeah, and an immediate sympathy between the bandit and this kid. the only one whom he likes. And at the end of the sequence of this scene, Cobra Verde says, "I never had a friend." So that seems to be the only one whom he likes. And of course, the story here deviates completely from Bruce Chatwin's book. His book was, of course, the beginning of everything and the stumbling block and the initiative of everything. But of course, I said to Bruce Chatwin, I have to go on my own, and he didn't mind at all.
Did he ever get to see the final film?
Yes, he saw it before he died. He saw it.
And what did he think?
He liked it. He liked it a lot, and he was on location in Africa, and I didn't know how seriously ill he was at that time. He was actually slowly dying away, and he made it to Africa anyway, and I told him, if you come, I'll have 6 hammock years for you and take you around in a hammock. You must come, you must see that. Later, when we are at the palace of the king of Dahomey, we'll see the place where he spent some fortnight with me.
Immer nach Westen. 4 Jahre mit dem Pferd und 10 zu Fuß. Und dann, weißt du, dann kommen die Berge, die immer höher aufsteigen, bis über die Wolken. Und über den Wolken, da kommt dann der Schnee. Er fällt immer nur nachts, wie Federn. Aber immer nur über den Wolken.
Here the dwarf is repeating a poem. Why is that?
It's not really a poem, it's just his fantasies about snow, and I wanted to have somehow in the audience and of course in the head of Cobra Verde, the bandit, implanted a great vision, a great idea, a great longing. In this case it's about snow. He has never, of course, nobody knows what snow is in the Sertão, in the dry, arid areas of Brazil. And he dreams of seeing snow and touching snow.
Und die Flocken fliegen auseinander wie Federn.
And I think this is not in Bruce's book. I do not recall that. I think it was my invention.
In ein paar Jahren verkaufe ich die Bar, nehme ein Pferd und gehe nach Westen bis in die Berge.
Ich gehe nach Osten ans Meer. Der Sertão vertrocknet die Herzen und tötet das Vieh.
Vor dem Meer muss man Acht geben. Es ist die Wiege der Stürme und die Wiege des Schnees. Das hat mir Hochwürden gesagt.
Yeah, I like this young man very much. He had such a warmth and such an enthusiasm about this film. He really loved to work on this. And here this was shot without any artificial light. It was just these lights here flickering, and very high-speed film, high-speed lens. I didn't want to have any technical thing in there. Just create a certain special climate.
This is one of my favorite scenes in the film.
Yeah.
The mistress, she comes dancing out to him.
Yeah, an old church that I had found that was in decay. The burro fleeing, getting away. And he will ask now, money or life? And she answers, life.
All in a church.
Geld oder Leben?
Leben.
We actually brought this young woman from Africa, and I liked her so much that I brought her all the way to Colombia for just this year. And she has something very, very, very strange and special about her. This, of course, is pure stylization. It has nothing to do with real life.
But it's very sensual.
And I like that the film takes its time with a scene like this. And quite often there are disproportionate amounts of time spent for certain things. And that is something which you would find in some of my films, or in many of my films. And I can't really explain why it is, but I think it is right. There is something which is not the way Hollywood would do it, with quick cuts from one to the other and close-ups, and it works better like that, I think.
And then the sequence ends right here. We're sort of back into the storytelling.
Jeden Tag gehst du 40 Meilen durch die Dornen. Und warum bist du barfuß? Hast du keine Schuhe?
Ich traue keinen Schuhen.
Yeah, I like this. It fits to Kinski and it fits in this scene.
Ich würde niemals einem Pferd
Yeah, he doesn't
trauen.
trust a horse
Ich
either.
traue auch keinem Menschen. Aber ich sehne mich hinaus in eine andere Welt.
And here, this is his dream, to go to the sea.
Yeah, he actually has reached the sea, and he's dreaming of some horizons beyond, a continent beyond it, a life beyond that, beyond poverty, beyond being just a barefoot bandit somewhere in the northeast of Brazil.
And what location is this, Werner?
This is in northern Colombia, Cartagena. Very, very scenic old town, nowadays all occupied and bought up by drug barons. It used to be a cultural center of the Caribbean coast of Colombia.
And where did the actors come from?
They're all local people. And this man is José Lefgoy, a famous Brazilian actor who actually acted in Fitzcarraldo as well, and he's a great star in his country as a soap opera star, but he has wonderful qualities. I like him a lot.
Bleib stehen. Es wird sonst viel schlechter für dich.
Were the actors uncomfortable with the position of being slaves?
No, not really. They knew exactly, of course, that was their heritage, that was their background, and they somehow understood that they were taking part in something that was a great metaphor on slave trade, that there was something that has not really been subject of films until that time. In books, yes, but films, strangely enough, have never really dealt with that. Now there are a couple of other films in between, but in the meantime, but this was made in 1989 or so.
Hey, du ohne Schuhe. Wie ist dein Name?
Da Silva. Francisco Manuel da Silva.
Ich bin Colonel Octavio Coutinho. Ich bräuchte jemanden wie dich. Auf meinen Feldern habe ich 600 Sklaven.
You can almost sense Klaus despises this rich
Yeah, sure.
baron.
Im Zuckergeschäft bin ich der Größte.
Here's something very genial and jovial. I kind of like this actor a lot. And now, of course, in Colombia, and that was shot in Cali, at the outskirts of Cali, in a big villa. I think this villa 2 years later was bought up by one of the big drug cartel bosses who was shot dead another year later. And his 3 daughters now of the colonel.
This also is something that I don't believe was in the book. This is something you've added.
Yeah.
So viel Wäsche habe ich noch nie in meinem Leben gehabt.
Es macht mich ganz wahnsinnig, an Horizonte zu denken, die noch nicht mit meinem Zuckerrohr bebaut sind. Das macht mich ganz krank, an Länder zu denken, auf denen meine Rinder nicht grasen. Stärke an Mulattinnen, die ich noch nicht geschwängert habe, ist unerträglich für mich. Nimm dich in Acht vor den Frauen, da Silva.
Funny line considering what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Keine Sorge, lass dir Zeit, ich zeige dir alles.
The sugarcane field, and people who really knew how to handle sugarcane.
Hier wirst du Verwalter sein. Wir ernten hier 2-mal im Jahr, so fruchtbar ist es. Ich habe außer dieser noch 40 Zuckerplantagen. Ich allein produziere mehr Zucker als der ganze Staat Pernambuco. 120.000 Tonnen pro Jahr. Und es geht alles nach England zu unseren Feinden. Sie haben zwar die Sklaverei abgeschafft und sie bringen schon Sklavenschiffe auf, aber ohne uns hätten sie keinen Zucker. Und dabei essen sie so viel Zucker, dass wir
Kinski
immer mehr
really
davon anbauen.
bored and pissed. Yeah, he can show it so well. Yeah.
Das Zuckerrohr wird ausgequetscht und hier wird der Saft eingedickt. Die Melasse wird auf über 120 Grad erhitzt.
And this is real traditional